G'day, I'm Dale Blackwood, and welcome to a very spooky edition of Completely Cooked Games. In this special edition of Completely Cooked Games, I'm going to make my spookiest game yet. Both those other games are pretty stiff competition. So what's it going to be? It's going to be a cooperative 3D platformer in the style of Mario 3D World. So we've got Mario, we're also going to add Luigi. I think it should be a 4-player co-op game. And you know what? Store-bought Marios are always smaller. I find if you pick fresh, you get big plump ones. And now I've got to add a 3D world, so that'll do. Okay, so this one's going to take me 12 hours. Let's see how we go. Alright, so it's time to hit the drawing board and find some inspiration. And I figured this time it could be interesting if I drew inspiration from a Nintendo game. In particular, Super Mario 3D World. One thing that I really like about Super Mario 3D World that not a lot of other games do well is same screen cooperative, but in a big proper world. So in Mario 3D World, the players are on the screen together and they kind of move in the same direction. All of the options kind of have the same flow and direction to them. So the players can pick a path, but at the same time, they're going to head in the same direction. So you find yourselves working together to get to the end of the level, where all of a sudden, you're pitted against each other. See, at the end of the level, one of you gets a crown, and the crown isn't worth a damn. But I'm getting that goddamn crown, and there's not a thing you can do to get it from me. When you're considering combining Mario and Halloween, it's worthwhile considering that they've already done it a lot with Ghost Mansions, and then again with Cap Kingdom. I mean, Cap Kingdom kind of reminds me of The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is also worth considering, especially if you're a spooky goth with big feelings. There's also Costume Quest by Double Fine. It's set in a Halloween universe and it uses costumes on the characters, which is actually pretty cheap to make from a rigging and animation perspective. There's also older animations like Casper and Scooby-Doo to consider. Creepy graveyards have been creepy for a very long time, and these cartoons really nailed the aesthetic. And when the aim of the game is to keep the players on screen at all times with a fixed view, it's worthwhile considering the isometric view from Death's Door and Tunic. Those manage to get a fairly wide range by making sure that the cardinal directions lie on the diagonals. That gives a much greater distance between where the characters are and where the furthest point that they can see is. And then I scoured the internet for some inspiration, as one does. I found this lovely picture by Katie White Art. That's absolutely awesome, and I really like the vibe that it's got. I'd like to capture a vibe similar to that, I think. I also found this costume, which apparently was left at Gustav's house, so if this is your costume, maybe get in touch with Gustav. In a lot of my searches for stock and photos, I was just getting a lot of generative AI. I don't know whose style it's borrowing from. I'm gonna mostly ignore this and go to this awesome kid's costume. Hell yeah. I'm definitely gonna work with this dodgy ass looking thing. It's amazing. And then on top of that, I'm just going to include candy piñatas and candy and obviously pumpkins, or maybe pumpkins with feet. Oh yeah, pumpkin with feet I've written there. Cool. So I'm just going to make all that. Alright, it's time for phase 1, and in phase 1 we're going to make a character, and that character is going to be a ghost. In particular, an anthropomorphic ghost. So I'm going to do everything in symmetrical editing mode. I've done the legs, getting the arms here, put those on an angle, and then lastly give him 2 big eyes. And that looks like somebody in a ghost costume. And while of course real ghosts are white, we're going to need some coloured trimmings so that you can tell the difference between player 1, player 2 and the rest of them. So I'll map that texture back onto the model, give him some rim, give him some sleeves, give him coloured shoes. I'm not sure it's quite enough colour, so I'm going to give him some coloured shorts as well. And hopefully that's enough colour. Like expensive cuts of meat, ghosts are ordinarily boneless, but I'm going to make an exception here so that I can animate it. And I'm also going to use automatic weights, because manual is for talented people. And now that he's posable, I'm going to put in an animation for the idle loop, and I'm going to put in one for the run loop, and let's see how he looks. Pretty spooky. For a lot of the other actions in his moveset, I'm just going to put him in various poses, and I'll call them up later in code. That way I can switch between sit, jump, dash, poop. Right, so now I'm going to bring the model into Godot and Right, so now I'm going to apply modifiers and bring the model into Godot and then place something underneath him for him to stand on. I'll do a little bit of movement code and I'll get him moving in the wrong direction, so I'll fix that up. hook up the rest of the blend shapes in the animation state machine, and we're off to the races. Right, so that's our character modeled, rigged, animated, and controlled through code, but it's taken us 3¼ hours, and while that's a tiny bit above industry standards, it's a massive chunk out of the total 12-hour time. So we've got to get making worlds quick smart. In order to craft the levels for this game, I'm going to be using my own Godot plugin, GoShapes. GoShapes allows you to quickly create level geometry out of splines. It does all the mesh handling for you and wraps it around a curve. So as you can see, you can very quickly prototype up and shape up levels. Here, the trees are being placed programmatically, and here the geometry is. My intention with GoShapes was to make level design in Godot a lot quicker and easier, especially for prototyping purposes. So if you're a Godot developer and that's something that interests you, you can check it out on the Godot asset library or on GitHub. In this game, I'm also using Cookbot. It's just a repository of stuff that I use in pretty much every prototype in Godot. Things like input handling for 4 players and a keyboard, things like music players, like sound players, some basic maths functions, things that you use in every single game, like a ghost replay system. Like a ghost, that's a really particular use case. Why would there be a ghost replay system? Alright, phase 2, let's get some level designs done with GoShapes, but before we do, let's make a ruler that's about as long as our guy can jump, but also as high as he can jump. Then I'm using GoShapes to quickly draw out some level shapes. I'm going to get some geometry in there. I'll place a fork in the road right here, and we'll go visit our glorious work, and it's way too big. Alright, I'm shrinking that down. I'm going to add some square platforms to the end of that. I'll put some longer platforms here and add a little bit of color around the place, and voila! But my level is decidedly unspooky, but it won't be if I place pumpkins inside it, so I model and texture one of those, and also candy to place inside it, and then put it in a scatter shaper, and get it to place the pumpkins that I'm too time poor to place myself. But we're going to need to break open the pumpkin if we want to get to that sweet, sweet candy inside it. So I make a pumpkin particle, create up an exploding effect, and put that in. Alright, and just like that, we've whooshed past the halfway mark and we're at 5½ hours left. And what have we got? We've got a player character that can move around a level. The level doesn't really have an end, there's no gameplay loop, there's no second player, there's nothing to score, there's no challenges, and it's not really a game. But apart from that, we're looking like we're in alright shape. The only thing that we have to do from here is go and make the rest of the game. Alright, it's time to put a second player into this multiplayer game, and I'm going to add scoreboards for both player 1 and player 2 so that they can score things. They're also going to need something to aim for at the end of the level, so I modeled up a cauldron and filled it up with green goopy stuff and put it in. The Godot default font is a little bit, well, default, so I replaced it with this font and then moved the thing. Why won't it move? I don't have time for this shit. Moving on, I'm adding the scoreboards to the end level screen, and then I'm going to add a title screen. For now, I'm calling it Jelloween. Let's add some maps. So I'm making the second map using the same technique with my GoShapes plugin. I'm going to add some round curvy paths and straight bits, other bits, and that's enough for that one. And then for a third map, I'm going to do some height building. I'm going to do more offsets, and this one's just going to go gradually higher and higher and longer and maps and maps and maps. And with half an hour left, I'm going to do some theming. So I add some dark grass around the outside with the GoShapes edge function and spread that to the other platforms. I then go into Blender and I'm going to knock out a little bit of a tree, and I'm going to put it in the same scatter shape collection as the pumpkins and the candy to give it a little bit more look and feel. Right, that's it. Time's up. How did we go? Yeah, it could have been better, to be honest. You see, the cooperative mode is actually kind of fun to play, but the camera ends up being right between all of the players in the average position. So if player 1 and player 2 get too far apart, neither of them end up on screen. This compounds because eventually you will run off the edge, and the game's going to return you right back to your off-camera position. So once you're out of camera, it's very difficult to get back on camera. So if I had a bit more time, I would fix that and make it so that the lead player takes a bit more of the camera's focus. The single player, however, fared far worse. So much so that I put it right in the bin just before the timer was up. The reason for it is there's nothing to aim for. You see, you're going through and you're collecting candy in a level that's not that hard to do, and then you get to the end and it's like, congratulations, you've got 150 candy. If I had more time on single player, I'd put in a ghost replay system, and then I'd feed it with my playthroughs so that you have something to aim for in the game. But I don't have any more time because of an arbitrary time limit that I set for myself. Wait! So I'm just going to put 6 more hours on the clock, and we'll see how we go. It's time for overtime! Time. Okay, we're into the overtime, and that means we're creating sound and music. So I'm using SFXer, and I have a list right here. Sounds good, and now it's time for some original music, and this is me playing heaps and heaps of music, and not the same part over and over again. Sounds acceptable. Alright, I'll mess with the camera stuff and I'll put the sounds in the game too, and it'll sound a little bit like this. Next, because the single player kinda sucks and is non-existent, I'm implementing ghost replays using some of the code from the Cooked Game Jam repository. Okay, so the last thing that's left to do is just polish up a title screen. So I'm going to set a nice moonscape and some clouds, and I'm going to bring in the logo, and the logo says Jalloween. That doesn't say Jalloween, does it? What does that say? Spooky, scary, or 3D worlds. Okay, that's 6 hours of overtime spent. Well, actually it's only 5.5 because I'm not wearing a watch. But it just shows you that 6 hours of polish makes the world of difference. The ghost replay system is in there and you can play against my ghosts. That is actually really fun, and in order to set the times that are in the game, I had to beat myself a few times, and that was really fun. The multiplayer aspect is as fun as it was before, except now the camera does follow the lead player. And also, if you fall off the edge, you get spawned back closer to the lead player. This should fix things. I haven't played it much in co-op yet. That's going to come up right after this. Also linked in the description is GoShapes, the world building plugin that I used to make the levels for this, and of course Godot, the awesome open source 3D engine that I built it in. There's also a few other bits and pieces if you're interested in game development. If you've enjoyed yourself, don't forget to hit like and subscribe and maybe share it around. That guy didn't. You don't want to know what happened to him. Alright, that's it for this episode. I'd like to declare this game completely cooked.
The pumpkin is so cute. Wait, is he not meant to get candy?
He's getting candy. Remember, if he beats you to the end, then it takes away from your candy. Yep, I'd smash it just to the end now. And you'll take tons out of it. Just jump in. Yeah.
Wait.
So you're taking away from it. Oh, that's a real close one.
Oh.
Yeah, you got him.
This is fun.
Alright, let's do 2-player.
What?
I only really needed that 1 point to win by. I didn't want to gloat.
I got good. What do I get if I win?
You get all of the candy that you collected in the game, but in real life. That's it.
I won the whole thing.
You won.
Candy, please.
Godot Games.
Boy, mate, go play the bloody game. The link is in the description. Good on you, mate. Have a good go at it.